Being that it's Scorpio season, it would be absolutely rude not to talk about Pluto. In fact, without understanding Pluto, we cannot really ever fully understand Scorpio as an archetype. And so when better than now to do that? So in this week's video, I'm going to talk about Pluto in more general terms, in the sense of like, what is it? What's Pluto? What does it stand for? What is the archetype? What's the archetype about? And the next week, I want to talk about how you can work with Pluto in your own chart, with Plutonic material in general, and then some, obviously, as always, astrological tips of how to do that within your own chart. So make sure you check my next week's video. But this week, I want to start with this almost like a conclusion of everything I'm going to be sharing with, even though it will sound pretty kind of like unglamorous. But it's at the core, at the essence, it's like the thing about Pluto. And yet you will see there is no one word that actually sounds like Pluto word. And if you've been with me for a while, you know how much language is important to me, astrology language, to denote as precisely as it's possible, as cleanly as it's possible, the archetypes we use and work with, really, and therefore, speak about. So this essence, as I see it, of Pluto, kind of in a nutshell, is that Pluto is the reason why we keep incarnating, or why we reincarnate, why we keep coming back into a body, into a form, into 3D, onto this Earth planet as humans, and I assume always just humans. In other words, for as long as Pluto is still on a mission, as in it has not completed its mission, it has not completed its mandate, we, one, will be reincarnating. And so what is that? What is that about? What is that reason that we keep incarnating? What is that reason about Pluto that we keep incarnating? And that's just one word: desire. And I smile like this because this word desire has so many, more typically, wonderful associations when we think of it, right? Pleasure, joy, satisfaction. But really there is a dark side of desire. But it's, as we are also, I'm sure, aware of, all of us will have some list, smaller or shorter or longer list of some darker desires that we have. But this kind of smile that it always makes me, it always arises in me when I think of desire in the sense of Pluto, is that how we are not accustomed to, how we're actually not accustomed to expressing or accepting desire just on that pure level of pleasure without morality, and how for that reason it trips us up, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, interesting thing about Pluto and desire, and therefore I would say any and all desires, is that it's unconscious. So Pluto, in other words, stands for unconscious desires, our unconscious desires. Now, there's more to this. Pluto is the engine, the unconscious, deeply buried in our psyche, i.e. unconscious, we're not aware of it, right? Engine that drives us. And this word drive is very much the word that is the desire word, because that kind of sense of drive, we feel driven. It's like there is a desire that wants to come forth, right? That, that's how we know it's a desire, because there is this really strong pull that we feel. Now you can understandably ask, and I do forgive me about the light, I just have no way of reducing this light. So it creates all kinds of weird shadows, which is very fitting actually, for Scorpio season, but also for Pluto. So you may wonder, like, if it's so deeply buried and unconscious and, deep, like hidden, right, from our conscious awareness, how do we even get to it? Here we come to Mars, Pluto's soldier, or Pluto's messenger, as I like to call them, or it rather, sorry, the Mars archetype. So in order for us to start even working with Pluto, which I'll go into an actual specific detail and I'll just touch on now, all we need to do is look at our Mars. And I don't mean in our just chart, which absolutely when we use chart to work with our Pluto, but in general, just life desires and this unconscious, like we just need to look at what we do. what are we, what is our behavior? What does our actions, what do our actions, our ways of being, what we do not do, all the Mars kind of function like defense, offense, activity, physical activity. When action meets like evidence, it's an evidence, right, of what we do and how we do, and it's also, it's evidence of how we are by showing what we do, by doing, right? We show, you know, how they say, like, you know, you can say you're sorry about someone, or you can say you love someone, but if your actions don't follow and they're not congruent with those words, they mean nothing. So it's really the actions that we want to look at that will tell us about our actual truth, as in true desires. Now, both are unconscious still. So when I say Mars is like something that it's evident, don't mistake it for being conscious, because in conscious in terms of how I use it here, at least in today's video, will be like conscious awareness. We know, we are aware of what is behind, like there is nothing hidden. That's what consciousness in my sense of that word today means. So Mars is not conscious in that way. Remember, Mars is the archetype of Aries. It's the first one. It's aware of itself, but only on that level of action. But it doesn't really care about the reasons and why it's doing what it's doing. It's just, it absolutely thrives on the experience, like having that life rubs against it, like just, you know, pushing up against life. So that is one way how we can clearly see, well, clearly maybe not the word, but we can start to understand what are our Plutonic desires, which are really the desires that sustain our life, that until we have exhausted, until we have lived them and experienced them, fulfilled them all fully, we will keep reincarnating, and to be in the body and to be in the matter, as joyous and as gorgeous and beautiful and pleasurable it is, it's in equal measures full of suffering and pain, maybe not equally distributed to each of one of us. Some of us have more pleasure than pain, and etc., as I'm sure you know. But it's, in essence, that's what being in the 3D world is. It's like the one doesn't go without the other. So that's where the motivation for Pluto work is. It's like, if you want to perpetuate suffering for yourself or others, then don't bother with Pluto work. But then Pluto will never really let you decide that. It will just drag you into its own world and do its way with you, whether you are consensual or not, really. There is a Jung's quote that goes something like this: that for as long as you let your unconscious drive you through life and makes, you just go blindly or unconsciously through life, just following desires that you haven't made conscious, you will call it fate, that kind of life, right? You will call it fate, whatever comes your way. So that's the Pluto work. In order not to feel at the mercy of fate, you make those desires, i.e. your Pluto, those unconscious desires, which most of us are most of the time driven by, believe it or not. Well, I imagine you don't have to believe, you just need to look at your life honestly. Very Plutonic word. You will call it fate. So to make it conscious, so you don't feel at the mercy of fate, external events, like a victim, right? You then you dive into your Pluto. And one of the key words to do that is why. So you understand why you're feeling, why you're acting like you're acting, etc., etc. So like I said, I'll go into that in more detail next week. But I needed to touch on this because it's important, because that's a Mars piece. Like the two archetypes are intricately woven in. They're basically, Pluto is like a higher octave of Mars, basically. So we go to Pluto to understand why we do what we do. But we need that Mars to just give us even a starting point. Without Mars, we wouldn't even know what to do and where to look, right? Now, what's particularly interesting about this dichotomy between Mars and, I don't know if they're a dichotomy really, they're like a sequence, I would say more, is that they fulfill two functions of this desire. It's always a desire, both stand for desire, Mars and Pluto, right? And it's unconscious, we established that, but the difference between, they're both unconscious, until we bring consciousness I, right? But they also stand for two different qualities of this desire. So Mars is a desire to separate. In fact, these are the dichotomy. This is the dichotomy, the conflict, the contrast, but conflict more importantly. So Mars stands for separation. So all of, and that's why it's easy to see, it's easy to access, because we are designed, and I don't want to touch on topics that I will go in deep into while we're going to Pisces, when we're in Pisces season, about ego, soul, spirit, all that kind of Piscean stuff. But I just want to touch on that. Basically, this idea of separation, however much you hear language among spiritual people who'd like to think, including myself, that we're evolved or enlightened to an extent, nowhere near human properly, but certainly heading in that direction, at least desiring to be, right? We talk about oneness and love and unity and all that stuff, but really, for as long as we're in form, i.e. bodies, names, identities and all that, right? Stories, we are separate, and that is why we incarnate, to separate from source, right? So Mars, because it's that, like, our conscious, in the sense of our evident actions, evident identity, everything evident that we can see, point out, stands for separation. Pluto, so the irony, sort of the twist to this conflict and contradiction, is that Pluto actually stands for the opposite. But it's really, okay, so let me say what Pluto stands for. It stands for the desire. So this is a desire to separate. So that's desire to separate, which is what being on Earth is all about. Being in 3D is all about, to be separate. Not in a horrible way, just to actually define myself separate. Like, so I have boundaries. I'm separate from Earth, as in air or whatever, right around me. Otherwise, I would just blur. So it's no moral there. There's nothing wrong with separateness. So that's Mars. And the other Plutonic desire, the one underneath that desire, is desire to return to source. Hence, so to kind of get back to the beginning of what I was saying, like why Pluto is the reason we keep reincarnating, because it hasn't taken us to its this ultimate desire, which is to return to source. But we can only return to source via desire, right? We need to desire to return to source. However, being that that's a higher octave, even though it's subconscious, so there is it's higher, but it's underneath, buried, means it takes time to get to that level, like higher, going high vibe, or, the ascension levels, like 3D, 4D, 5D, 12D, whatever, right? They're all kind of higher. So it's like it takes time for us to evolve to that level. But the steps we need to take in order to get higher, and this is interesting because this is where the visual of Pluto being under Mars, like it's unconscious, it's below, it's hidden, below the obvious, we can't see, right? It means we have to descend to get high, to reach that next level of evolution, or the highest ultimate, to return to source, right? So what I mean by that is that there is that desire which we will feel at the end for real, but in order to feel it for real, as opposed to desire to bypass everything just to get to that, so we are free of all the alleged crap and shit that happens in our life, or in the world, we can't skip all the other desires that are going to take us there. And they are treacherous. They are deepest, darkest, amongst other not so, but it's mostly deeper and darker, or deepest and darkest. Another theme, quality of Pluto, or another desire, we can even say, of Pluto, is power. Now, I want to ask you to consider two different definitions. One is the power as a concept, as like what. So this is the work of the mind, how mind defines power, and it's therefore, being that it's that more superficial level, right, will align so if that definition will make more sense to do when we look at our Mars, that will be the connection, it will be Mars-like, where the other is actually what Pluto is. that kind of power. So the first question is like, what is power? So when we ask like that, we are talking to our mind. And so I could offer my answer. I mean, you can think for yourself. But to me, it's the ability to affect change. So it's manipulation. Remove the morality that's associated with the judgment that comes with that word. But just manipulate means to kind of take something and you can actually change something. You have the power to affect something and make it what you want it or whatever, but you have the power to make that change. That is what power is, if you ask me. So now that's, at the core, so you can obviously talk about all these other powers that are more evident in the world of politics and relationships and business and, whatever, I don't know. But at the core of it is that function that's the criteria, right? If you can't, and there is actually another term that's often used in astrology circles, at least, it's the agency. So it's that agency you have that power to change. So that is power, the ability to change, that is power. Conceptually speaking, important distinction. The Plutonic definition of power, again, if you ask me, is like the question then is rephrased to, what does it feel to have power? What does it feel like? So I'm gonna think about it. Pause this video. I would like you to actually pause this video and just really sort of sit with yourself for a moment, 2, 3, 10, whatever, and just really like, what does it feel to have power? Or what does power feel like? So I'm going to offer you my answer, which I believe that it will be yours too, or similar enough. But please let me know in the comments. I would so love to hear, which is that sense of aliveness. Like the sense of life, like you have all the energy. And if you think of like, fantasy movies, fiction or whatever, like, those witches or any of the magicians and all those kind of characters, they wield power by energy. They do nothing. They stand, they're not running around building things. They just stand and they conjure up energies and they manipulate energy. What energy is really life force, right? It's at least how I, again, see it and view it. So power, to feel powerful, to have power, feeling-wise, is that sense of aliveness. I'm going to add another layer to it. There's like something that is going to possibly trip us up, which I would actually agree does very much trip us up, is that sense of aliveness is akin to arousal. The very, yes, you thought correctly, sexual arousal. Now, in this sense that I'm talking about, in sense of Pluto, yes, Pluto and Scorpio are definitely, and Mars are definitely associated with sexuality, but that's not where you want to go. It's like to understand Pluto. That's like another kind of, to do like on a to-do list, like, yeah, it does that. It's like a, sort of almost not substantial enough, just a thin list of things. What you want to do is like, why? Why is sexuality associated with Pluto, Scorpio, or Mars? But we're talking Pluto now. Is purely because aliveness, because it's like it's almost like, like when you want light, you put light on. When you want fire, you put on. If you're camping out there, you just use a lighter and, just light something and there you have fire, right? That's what sexuality is. Like, it's just using something, the easiest thing that will bring you so much aliveness. Like your whole body is on fire. Fire being life force here, prana, right? So that aliveness. So sex is just like a quickest way to do that. If you feel like you need fresh air, you're gonna open the door and you come out and hopefully, live somewhere you have fresh air and you take some fresh air. Instead of, I don't know, buying a purifier or something like that and, making, so it's like a quickest route to getting to feeling alive. So that's all. So it's just like, that's how can I show you what feeling alive is fully and utterly? Is like, yeah, like get aroused, even better, have an orgasm, right? That is like the accumulation of build up of an energy. Just think again back to someone on the cliff, like some magician, white beard, a woman, flowing hair or whatever, doing all kinds of energetic work, lightning and stuff. That's all it is. That's orgasm. That's sex. That's actually power. That's why. It's not because sex is kind of irrelevant. It's just a tool to get there, is what I was ultimately trying to say. So remember that for next week. The second, or I don't know how many things, fourth maybe, theme that Pluto is associated with is evolution. Now, this is important also so evolution meaning change, meaning, remember, it's a desire, however unconscious, to return to source. But you don't just skip and bypass all the other desires. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in 3D. You wouldn't be a body if you didn't have any other except that desire. Hence why we keep reincarnating, all that, right? So you don't skip, or you just keep coming back and you're stuck, right? Anyway, so that in that sense, it's an evolution. So all these desires, as we fulfill them, as we let them give them life, we'll let them give us life more than anymore, actually, correctly. All of that is evolution. We are evolving. And what's important to remember when we think of evolution, and just generally Pluto, desire as well, but like I say, Pluto is really, desire is synonym for Pluto. Evolution, maybe not so closely, like if there was to be one word that is synonym, like identical to Pluto, it would be desire in my books. Pure and proper just desire. Literally, that's another word for Pluto. So evolution is really, when we think of evolution, I would remind you to remember that Pluto is impersonal. Like if you think of it as a planet, or rather, is it planetoid or something? It's been demoted or something stupid, whatever, who cares? But in terms of astrology and archetypes, it's the most powerful archetype. But in terms of astronomy, that's always useful to also look at that to understand an archetype. It's furthest out there. So it's so removed from Earth, and Earth being in this context, in this narrative I'm now sharing here with you, is kind of the closest ego, or rather I, like the most personal, right? So it's me, Maya, looking like this, living here at this age, blah, whatever, right? So that's Earth, and this is furthest from Earth it could be, right? Pluto, hence being impersonal, and one way of understanding that. But also Pluto is like atom, is another one. I heard this from an astrologer many years ago. Her name is Sanja Peric. You may have heard of her if you are from Balkans or whatever. And I love that. She was explaining how to actually essentially speak of that impersonality, like impersonalness of Pluto. It's like an atom bomb, right? It's just sheer power, but it's like indiscriminate. It just doesn't really, the only purpose is to explode, let's say, right? It doesn't matter what's gonna do. It's like nature as well. Nature is another beautiful example of Pluto. Like it's forces beyond human mind. When I say human power, I was gonna say human power, but really what I mean there is human mind, and probably actually even physical power, like physical strength and all that. But certainly mind to affect, right? So in that sense, nature is impersonal. So Pluto is like nature. It's evolution, like the landscape has changed. We have, continents have been made. That's debatable, like what's the ultimate goal for the Earth changing shape and all that. Forget about global warming for a moment, which is kind of problematic. But even before it was problematic, still things were shaking and shaping, right? Reshaping. Not sure what the ultimate goal is. With Pluto, I do know. Well, I know, because I know Pluto, right? I studied. Is that return to source? So, but just as an example is like how nature works, equally impersonal. Like we all love nature, right? I mean, I certainly do. I know many of you, I'm sure, do as well. It's gorgeous, beautiful. It gives us so much, right? But equally, it destroys, and it doesn't. The same nature that children in a town somewhere in Indonesia would have just loved and played and cherished and all that, might tomorrow be killed if there is tsunami or something, because they just happen to have been in the wrong place, wrong time, too close to it, right? That's what I mean. That horror, that the sheer horror of something so powerful being impersonal is Pluto. But I would argue, and I will talk about that probably more next week, when I talk about how to work with Pluto, is to actually reverse that and flip it, because the very fact that it's impersonal makes it bearable. It's like, it's not about you. It's not about me who's just about to be demolished and, split in or whatever, broken into smithereens, never to be put back together in this body, certainly by a wave or something, or earthquake or fire, right? The fact that it is impersonal actually gives me some solace. It doesn't make me feel like it's the moment something isn't personal, there's something relaxes in us, at least in me, and I invite you to consider or contemplate that maybe for yourself too. Another thing Pluto is, something else Pluto is, which if you're into evolutionary astrology, you will have heard this, I'm sure. So this, I mean, I do, evolutionary astrology is something I very much, if I need to subscribe to a school, that would be the school I subscribe to. And Jeffrey Wolf Green's book Pluto. There are 2 volumes. Pluto, volume 1, I'm pretty sure it is, just about Pluto. Yeah, I don't like his style of writing at all, but it's a great foundation, particularly the sort of everything before it gets to the signs, because I find that signs some are really, really well done, others not so, in my view. But anyway, so he will certainly, you will see him, hear him, read him talk about it in this way. But I don't think other astrology school maybe does talk of Pluto in this way, if they talk about Pluto at all, which is that Pluto is the deepest, our deepest security roots. Why that is and what does that mean? So Pluto is, again, according to evolutionary astrology, evolutionary astrology equates Pluto with soul. I'm not using that word, as you have heard me yet not, and I will not, because in Pisces season I will be distinguishing between all these terms as I have finally cracked them. Well, maybe a few years I will have a new theory, but for now I'm really good with this one. But that in March, that's coming in March. But for now, just I want to say that evolutionary astrology uses says Pluto is soul. And so why it says that, amongst other reasons maybe, but what it means, it's like this, there is this one thing, that's soul, right, that remains the same through so many incarnations or reincarnations. So there is the sameness that exists throughout these incarnations is that memory. Because if you were different literally every single time, there is no common thread to you in all these lifetimes, you wouldn't remember the other lifetimes, because it would be literally like a story of someone you never met, right? But this was you in evolution astrology, and I very much agree with that. I just am not, soul is, I agree, but I'm not going to go there now. But anyway, so the point is that Pluto, if it's soul, and it is soul in the way I work with it, is this one thing, Pluto, that is the memory, the accumulation of memories of hundreds of lifetimes. Hence the deep, because so many lifetimes you were doing these, and then by filling the gap, meaning where your Pluto is sign-wise, house-wise, and aspects. So those 3, the Trinity, will determine that depth of memories that is where you feel most secure, right? Which is why it's so, even though these securities, and we'll talk about that next week, could be just things that you would just think, how is that, like a bad behavior, like, you feel like, I can speak of me very quickly, Pluto in Virgo, I literally identify with guilt feelings, like my identity has that at the root level. So unless I feel guilty about something, it's almost like that's not me. I need to feel guilty. So I'll talk about in my vlog, which is coming soon as well, one of my biggest realizations this year, this rather autumn. And that's a shadow. That's what Pluto in Virgo, amongst other things, would feel like. Identify with for so many years. It's like it's who I am. I'm driven by guilt, right? Okay, so it's like, oh, why would I feel secure in that? Yeah, you do, as in I do. And you pick your own. I don't know what yours is, right? But pick your own. So my point there is that even though it's like a very unpleasant, and it's like, who would want to do that, right? But there is a sense of security. It's like, that's who I am. I don't know who else am I without guilt. Like, I don't know. It just feels awful to be a human that doesn't feel guilty for everything and anything. Yeah, just give it to me. Yeah, I'll do it for you. It's like what I'm made for, right? Pluto, Virgo, whatever. You see? So it's sense of security. It's like I'm secure. Even though I'm in pain, I'm suffering. It's like ruining my life, blah, blah. I feel at home. Like abusive homes, horrible stories that actually people then continue having abusive relationship because that's what they know. Anyway, you get what I mean by these deeply secure patterns and roots in us are in Pluto, are Pluto basically. But they're far, because it's Pluto, and I'll get into the next point I'm going to make will clarify why that's like 9 out of 10 times, 9.9 out of 10 times, really bad news. But it's so deep because of so many lifetimes. It's a memory of being certain ways that, has become now one sense of identity so deeply, like unconsciously. Yeah. Okay, the next one is underworld. So Pluto is, this is why I love talking about mythology and archetypes, which is kind of, similar. So Pluto stands for Hades. I think that's the pronunciation in English. It's the the lord of the underworld, the god of the underworld. So in Christianity, that would be Lucifer, right? Even though there is a Lucifer, what's the word? Asteroid, right? Which stands for very much Lucifer, right? Anyway, but it's the god of the underworld, devil, right? All that. So what's in the underworld? Obviously, all the suffering and all the horrors and all the evils, right? So I'm just going to touch on this very briefly because that's going to be the main thing of the next week, like this whole around this, darkness that Pluto is essentially a bag full of, right? Like a Pandora box, but yeah. Is that a room, like an attic or basement or, cellar, whatever your word is, where we stuff everything we don't want to, it's not palatable to the world, because that's what hell, like if you look to Christian imagery, is. Everything that's been shamed and rejected and just like, that's not good, like the bad and good, good and evil, right? That's it. That's the good and evil dichotomy, or the, polarity. So that's what the world is. So Pluto rules all that, but that's next week on how to do that, how to go into your own underworld. And the final piece, and then I'm done for this week, is that what else Pluto is the uncompromising truth. So it's always, remember, Pluto is desire. It's literally the same word. If we could, if it would make sense to replace Pluto with desire for all the astrology purposes, I'd do it in a heartbeat, but it's impossible. It's stupid, whatever, right? But that's how identical they are. So all of these other words I have added I have been talking about that Pluto is, right? All the desire to be that, to go that, to experience that. It's always desires at the root of it, right? So anyway, so this uncompromising truth is what Pluto is. It's like why Scorpio, so remember at the beginning I said all of this will help you understand Scorpio as well. And so why Pluto, Scorpio, and this time of year is great for shadow work or therapy, which is a shadow work with someone, because we are looking for truth. Like that's why it's called shadow work and why it's scary, I suppose, is because truth is far more often than not, at least in terms of our ego, in terms of our stories, the ultimate truth is divine, like literally like divine, like you would say it's divine experience, like this food was divine, right? In that sense, divine, but also in the literal sense of that word. But we're not there. But the moment we're close to that, you wouldn't be watching this. I wouldn't be doing this. We were in a different world, like literally, energetically speaking. But since we're all here, we're still in the ego realm, where this truth is ugly. Sorry, that went again. Ugly. Unpalatable. Hence being hard to look at, hence being hard to get to, hence just generally speaking, Pluto is not something one faces like, that's probably go on, mate, let's go around, let's have a drink, coffee, whatever you do, right? It's ain't pleasant, to say the least. But back to power, which is the next, if there is a hierarchy of words, what Pluto is, desire, and then power, and then truth is the same. So if you go back, truth is in power, and desire. Okay, that doesn't work. Forget it. But the truth is where the power lies that we associate with Pluto. We talk about Pluto. So just to kind of give you another quick visualizing explanation, if you think of the hell as an archetype, as a space in human psyche to make sense of good and evil, right? In Christianity, or I don't know, other religions. I don't know. I'm sure other religions have it as well. It's just that I'm born in the white world where Christianity isn't predominant, so that's why I know it. But forgive me. I'm sure. Like I say, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Just for this sake, any extreme, any kind of polarity, this and then not that, right? This and then not this. So that's it. Good and not good is evil, right? Or whatever. Because the fact, because remember I said this is all ego, this is still all ego. Pluto is still ego. Everything we do here is ego. In that world, the only good, which is what I would say my life is mostly made of, B, mostly what I'm seeking. Like, I want good things. I want to have a good life. I want to live a good life. I don't seek out evil, right? And I imagine that goes for most of us, all of us, right? Here, at least. It's not true. It's not the whole truth, right? It might be true of my life as I'd like it and as I mostly live it on the surface and maybe on some kind of few layers deep. But the deep truth is that none of that can exist without evil. So yeah, I might not have evil in me, or at least certainly don't practice or anything like that, right? But it exists. And so I'm now into the next week, that's why I'm sort of slowing down, because I don't want to give too much away. Okay, just scrap that for a moment. If the ultimate uncompromising truth is that there is never going to be just good and some kind of less good, it's going to be the other extreme as well. That's the truth. And that's why it's called uncompromising, because you see, I've been trying to compromise even my speech here, partly because it's seeping into next week, but also because without preparing you to listen to next week's video, I haven't made enough caveats to kind of go uncompromisingly into that conversation, right? But therefore, if you're not prepared to do that, if you're not prepared to look at the uncompromising truth, you're not doing Pluto. You are cheating Pluto, and there's no such thing as cheating Pluto. And on that note, that's it. I'm not going to go further because we're literally stepping already into the next week. So please, if this was interesting, make sure you watch next Thursday or wherever you are, Friday, or, wherever in the world you are, where they come out. There will be next week on how to work with Pluto, which is basically going to be shadow work and all the tips and all the stuff that I can tell you about that.